Shalom. I'm still preparing Torah portion Behar, which is a reflection on Exodus 19 to 24 and also 34, basically up to 34, 35. And the topic is about on the mountain where Yahweh spoke to Moshe, and the time frame is pointing back to basically Exodus 34. But we are looking at, in this Torah cycle, everything that relates to the mountain. Last week we looked at the larger mountain on which the New Jerusalem will come down on, and the layers that associate with the creation of the soul and the cycles of the soul. This week I'm going to focus more on the cycles of holiness, still in the theme of last week's Torah portion, the higher call of holiness to the priesthood. So this is just a continuation of that main topic that we taking forward, bringing forward. And the initial comment or statement that Yahweh made in Exodus 19 and 20 is to announce or to appoint Israel as the kingdom of priests, and specifically the priesthood within the kingdom of priests. They are the ones that call to a higher calling, and they are the ones who joined Moses and Aaron and his two sons, representing the priesthood, and the 70 elders, which represent the kingdom of priests, or the elders within the kingdom of priests, to meet with Yahweh Elohim on the sapphire level, which is the stones made of sapphire, which we looked at last week. So that is the whole storyline. Now, preceding that was speaking the 10 words from the mountain, and preceding that is the cleansing of the people for 3 days. Preceding that is counting the Homer from first fruits, traveling on their way to the mountain. Now, Shavuot is basically the topic that I'm preparing for. I'm laying foundation in understanding Shavuot properly. So Shavuot, in my mind, and the things that I discovered this week, which I can't go into in these little short sections, it's too complex. It's about the 3 festivals that are mentioned by Philu, which is a Jew who lived in the 1st century, was a believer in Mashiach, was a prominent member, and he wrote a book or a writing or whatever, revealing the special laws of Yahweh, or explaining them, including the festivals, specifically the Feast of Shavuot. And he calls Shavuot 3 names. He called it the Great Feast, the Greater Feast, and the Greatest Feast. So that means that Shavuot has 3 different levels of elevation, if you like, or stages. So it's stage and approach where you first started, then you go to the next level, and then you go to the highest level. And it's similar to the pattern and the symbolism we see with Moses and the elders going up to the mountain, which is the 2nd level. The 1st level, of course, is to reach the foot of the mountain, and the highest level is to reach the top of the mountain. And it's all in relation to the mountain, Bahar. And the whole of Shavuot is centered around the topic of the mountain. So we are going to study this mountain this week. In relation to that, we are also going to count the Omer, which is another layer that I'm going to put on top of this. So we count the days of their traveling with certain verses that highlight which day it is based on a date that was given, and we confirm that with gematria on the calculation that I made to make sure that it's accurate and in line with my statement that I'm making. So I'm looking for that second witness. So it's not just my opinion, it's backed up by something coming from scripture. So that's the second thing we're looking at. We're looking at the days within the count. The third thing we're looking at, because it gives a date, we look at the day of the month those things happen. So there's another layer that we look at, numbers. And then the third layer I'm putting on top of this is the number of times Moses ascended the mountain. Now there's a total of 8 ascensions. Now people don't know that. They think it's only Moses went up the first time, he came back with the commandments, which he broke, then he went up the second time, then he came down and gave him the commandments, which are 2 ascensions. But it's actually a total of 8. And on the 8th one, he came down and his face was shining, which conclude the highest level. And number 8, of course, is near beginnings. That coincides with the end of Exodus, which has to do with the completion of the tabernacle, and the glory of Yahweh filled the tabernacle. So the glory of Yahweh filled Moses' presence, and Moses' skin was restored. Remember a couple of Torah portions back, we looked at Or, spelled with an iron, that skin. We also looked at Or, that's spelled with an aleph, that means light. So Moses received that glorified skin, or the glory of Yahweh that came upon him, that relates to number 8, which is new beginnings, but it also relates to number 6, which we're going to look at in this Torah portion, in relation to the day of the month, and also what it means in relation to the levels of the creation of the soul, of which number 6 is the highest one. Now, there was a comment made in last Shabbat regarding the Trinity. Now, the Trinity is a very human way of understanding, or trying to understand Yahweh. Now, we read the verse last week that there's 7 torches in front of the throne of Yahweh, which depicts his 7 spirits. So it's actually 7, not 3, if you think about that. Isaiah 11 verse 2 also states the 7 spirits of Yahweh, which confirms that he is 7, he's not 3. Now the 3 that we know, read about, or the understanding of the 3, are just the 3 functions of Yahweh Elohim. And that is the function of the Father, that means origin or originator. The Father of the Son, that means the offspring of, that come from the Father, or come from the origin. And then the function of his Spirit, which is the multiplication of the function of the Son amongst these people. And the Spirit has got a function of changing the nature back, so doing the internal work, and then later on the skin will be glorified, which is the external work. So the first coming deal with the inside, which has to do with Pentecost, which is also a topic of Shavuot, but it also deals with the skin and the glorification of the skin, which is also a topic of Shavuot, but is not yet fulfilled. That will be done during the second coming in relation to the New Jerusalem, in relation to level 6. So if you haven't listened to last week's Torah portion, I advise you to listen to that to understand the foundation, which I'm going to build on in this week's Torah portion, reflecting back on those things that were mentioned, the levels that were mentioned in relation to the day of the month, the account of the Omer, the number of times Moses went up the mountain, in relation to what's happening through the storyline of Israel arriving at the mountain and receiving the 10 words, and then the 2 sets of tablets, the broken tablets and then the renewed tablets. So that basically is the whole big topic called Shavuot, which got those 3 main headings: the great feast, the greater feast, and the greatest feast. So I'll leave you with that today, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll speak to you soon. Shalom.